Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to, or good afternoon. Welcome to our Land Use Committee meeting of Monday, April 16th. I am Katie Tang, chair of this committee. We have Vice Chair Supervisor Jane Kim here and Supervisor Asha Safai. We are also going to be joined very shortly by Supervisor Peskin. From SFGov TV, we'd like to thank Jesse Larson and Maya Hernandez. And of course, we'd like to thank our clerk, Erica Major, for being here. Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements for us?
Yes, please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the April 24th Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you please call item 1?
Yes, item number 1 is a resolution approving the list of projects to be funded with fiscal year 2018-19 road maintenance and rehabilitation account.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have Rachel Alonso here from SF Public Works.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Rachel Alonso from San Francisco Public Works. We're here to certify a list of street resurfacing projects that will be funded by $23 million in fiscal year 18-19 state road maintenance and rehabilitation account funds. RMRA is a new source of funds dedicated for street resurfacing. It was created by Senate Bill 1 last April, which will raise over $5 billion for transportation throughout the state of California. One of the transparency and accountability measures of SB 1 is requiring local governing bodies to adopt annual resolutions approving the project list of each jurisdiction. So that's why I'm here before you today. Public Works has identified 6 various locations projects for next year. That will include 220 blocks, which is approximately 1/3 of the program's expected output in the next fiscal year. Each various location project typically includes 25 to 45 residential blocks spread throughout numerous neighborhoods. And we use this project delivery approach for efficiency purposes because we're able to group single or small stretches of blocks together into one single project or a single construction contract. To provide more context, your packet includes 3 maps to show the blocks that Public Works has treated since fiscal year 2009 and 10, the blocks planned for next fiscal year with all fund sources, so RMRA and our other sources, as well as all of the blocks planned for the next 5 years with all fund sources. I'm joined today by our paving program managers, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I did have a chance to look over the map. So it looks like these projects are prioritized based on the pavement condition
Yes,
index score and project readiness as well.
Yes, we also look at coordination opportunities with other projects or other agencies, and yeah.
Okay, great. Hopefully we can hurry up and use this funding before, in case SB1 is repealed, which I hope not.
Exactly.
Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments on item number 1? Okay, seeing none. All right, then we will go. Oh, no. Did you have anything? No. Okay. All right, we will go to public comment then on item 1. Any members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Can we get a motion on item 1? Supervisor Safai.
Sorry. Send this item to the full board with positive recommendation.
All right.
Accepting the recommendations of DPW.
Okay, and we will do that without objection. Thank you. All right, item 2, please.
Item number 2 is an ordinance amending the building code to revise the city's Slope Protection Act by clarifying the scope of its application and affirming the planning department's determination under California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay, thank you very much. We have our sponsor here, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I think the long title of this measure pretty much sets it forth. I have one small amendment, which I'm passing out, which is on page 3, line 7, at section 106A.4.1.4.3 to insert the word either after property and the number 2, and I will pass those to the committee members. And I am happy to answer any questions. I want to thank staff at the Department of Building Inspection and the Building Inspection Commission that recommended these clarifications by a unanimous vote of those building inspection commissioners that were present.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Safai.
So, Supervisor, it says in here that in 2016 in the code, there was an omission, and it says that there's a reenacting the paragraph regarding the type of proposed construction that would trigger the application of this act? What type of construction is that?
I believe we have somebody here from building inspection who can answer that, or maybe Deputy City Attorney Givner can answer that. Let me just see if I can find that provision that was inadvertently omitted in 2016.
But is that at the heart of this act? I mean, I understand it's 25% slope grade.
So there
There's
are
also a type of construction. Is that kind of what you're trying to accomplish?
So originally, this legislation, which requires peer review of work done by a licensed geologist or geotechnical engineer, something we've learned a lot about in the Millennium hearings for projects that are in seismic hazard zones or are on steep slopes defined as over 25%, really came about because the original legislation referred to a map that is now outdated called the Bloom map. And so that language has been deleted, and the language that says exceeds an average slope of 25% grade is added to determine what's within the scope of this act. As to what was omitted, I see Deputy City Attorney talking.
I have it here, I think, but I believe that part said it would apply to construction work that include the construction of new buildings or structures having over 1,000 square feet of new projected roof area and horizontal or vertical additions having over 500 square feet of new projected roof area.
Right.
And
so
it'll also apply to any of the following activities: shoring, underpinning, excavation, retaining wall work, grading of over 50 cubic yards of earth materials, or any other construction activity that, in the opinion of the building official, may have a substantial impact on the slope stability of any property.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's absolutely right, and it's on page 3 from line 13 to line 20.
So from my understanding, it still allows for the building official to have provide their expert opinion, but just also clarifies when these requirements would apply.
That is correct.
Supervisor Safi, did you have any other questions?
That was one. And so in terms of section 106A.4.1.4.4, am I saying that right? Line 21 on page 3. So currently, is it that they're being required to have the Structural Advisory Committee review the geotech reports? And currently, what's the practice?
My understanding is that has been the existing practice. And we can go to, and Dan, do you want to, or Mr. Strawn? Mr. Lowry?
You guys are hiding in the audience.
Good afternoon, Dan Lowry, Deputy Director, Permit Services. So the current practice right now is at the Edge Hill Slope or the Mount Sutro or the listed area off the map. If it's determined it's 25 degrees or greater, it's the option to have the SAC. Some of the Mount Sutro and the Edge Hill is mandatory SAC review, and they have the identified areas for that. And the other ones would be the options where they look at the site permit and they determine the site SAC review is required.
Okay.
What I read was that in the legislation, the review by the Structural Advisory Committee, what you're asking about, Supervisor Safai, is that it'll be mandatory now instead of discretionary.
Just for the
Is that what
projects
you're-
on these 25% or more slopes, correct? I mean, if you're still on a slope, do you have to submit to this Structural Advisory Committee if it's less than 25%?
Yes, well, we have a little confusion as our part as far as 25 degrees versus 25%. So if it's 25 degrees there, according to the maps that we have, yes, it could be under a Structural Advisory Committee. We do very few SAC reviews a year, maybe 2 to 3 a year.
Right,
currently.
that's why I was asking, because I know that currently the threshold is pretty high to go to the SAC review.
Correct.
And so is this pretty much keeping it the same and just clarifying the language?
This will have an increase in the SAC review.
And what's the difference between current in what is being proposed?
If
So
it's-
right now, what's the threshold to go to SAC review?
Well, if it's a 25% grade, it'll increase the area of the existing maps that we have.
So what is the current map? What grade triggers a SAC review?
Well, the current map we have, and this here, it can increase it 25%, maybe even more. That would have to be under review.
So this is a significant increase in workload for your department?
Yes, it is.
Is this the right threshold?
It's being under review. The Code Advisory Committee looked at this there, and they weren't sure of this 25% because they didn't know where that figure came from.
So that's
There
my
wasn't a
question,
study
and
on
I'm,
that.
and I'm not trying to slow down Supervisor Peskin's proposal. I just want to make sure that staff has had the right time to kind of weigh in and make sure that this is the appropriate slope. So do you need more time to work out with the proposed sponsor so we can have a little more time so we have clarity on this?
So I would just submit through the chair to Supervisor Safai that this went to the Building Inspection Commission, and they are the policy body for the department. They recommend this by every member who was there for that vote. And by the way, if you look at the Bloom map, virtually all the areas on the Bloom map that were the subject of the original legislation were 25% or more. So I think the issue here that Supervisor Safai is getting to is the issue that is set forth in the mandatory submittal of reports and geotechnical review, which in the previous iteration were required to go to design review by a licensed geotechnical engineer, and in this particular version are required to go to the Structural Advisory Committee, which is really a body that has the expertise to do it. Relative to workload, this is all a function of fees that are paid for by the developer. The fundamental thrust of this update is just to make sure that there is the proper level of peer review on projects that are in seismically challenged areas, as we've experienced, as Mr. Lowry said, at Edge Hill, where there have been numerous failures, and we've had them in other parts of the city. Telegraph Hill has had numerous failures. So it seems like having this level of oversight and peer review on those challenged properties is the right, safe way of going about building in very challenging areas.
Yeah, it was approved by the Building Inspection Commission in the first reading there.
Right, but it sounds like is there a difference of opinion between staff and the commission?
I think you would need an engineer more to report to that. I'm not an engineer, but they could tell you the statistics, of a review there. But
What I'm trying to get at is that we have a significant portion of our city that is on slope, and I agree with the thrust of what Supervisor Peskin is trying to accomplish. I just know that going to the SAC review adds a significant amount of time and cost to a project that's already, and these projects, are they mainly additions, or are they mainly new construction for the most part?
it could be both. I mean, in Edge Hill, I know there's additions that run their SAC review, and it could be a new project. It's within the area of the map.
Yeah. So, but what I'm getting at is, so that's one, and then secondly, you said that staff hadn't really had an opportunity to weigh in terms of giving you a full idea of exactly how much additional work this is going to add to your department.
Okay, I think a lot of this review was done under the Code Advisory Committee. It wasn't reviewed under our staff.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Supervisor Peskin? I understand the commission approved it, but it sounds, getting some differences of opinion from staff, so I don't know how you want to proceed.
I would like to proceed and move the amendment if a member of the committee wants to do it, and would hope that the committee would send this piece of legislation that's been kicking around for quite some time to the full board.
Actually, just sorry, one last question, only because our office has been working a lot with DBI on accessibility for businesses, entrances. So one of the issues that came up in our conversations, especially recently, was just the number of buildings that might have to comply with the ADA law, the city one that we proposed a few years ago, but they might be, say, located in Chinatown or so forth, where there are a lot of hills and slopes. So how would this impact some of that work? Because I know a lot of businesses are a little bit worried and hesitant about the accessibility, the entrance program, and so how do we kind of balance the need for safety as well as helping people comply?
This program really wouldn't affect the accessible business entrance program because there's a square footage that has to be minimum before it's required to have that provision there in the ordinance. As far as the accessibility business entrance, is just for the entry of the building there. So the slopes are existing there. So
okay, thank you for that clarification.
That accessible business entry is a much bigger program. It's a much bigger area where they have to comply.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions or discussion on this? Okay, why don't we go to public comment on item 2 then first?
I'm Bob Planthold. I wanted to ask you to support Supervisor Peskin's legislation as requested to be amended. It's important to not talk about ADA without knowing, I think, all of the ramifications of it. One of the provisions when it was passed was that if a business did not have enough money at the time to start making its path of travel accessible, it should lay away money so that at a certain point in the future, it'd have enough money to start that process. But there was no provision in ADA that building inspection departments or planning commissions do any training of their staff or of the public. So it was a provision that was never passed along and therefore never enforced. A lot of jurisdictions are behind the time in terms of trying to get businesses to put money away. I'm going to bring that up because some years ago, San Francisco had an unreinforced masonry bond fund, and it may be that it's something in the future to consider whether there's some possible low interest or low interest pay down fund that can help businesses make themselves accessible. But in the meantime, anything that can be done to make a structure safe or safer, whether it's an addition, a new home, a small office building, it makes it helpful for everybody that we're less likely to have people get injured in a collapse or as a hill starts to slide down. So I'm going to suggest please move ahead.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Pat Buskovich. I think I'm the only structural engineer in this room, probably the only person qualified to talk about this, and I've been practicing since the 70s. I was the engineer who was brought in for the Knockx landslide, and very familiar with SAC, very familiar with the Bloom rules. The Bloom rule is a 20% threshold percent that then required you to go to the Bloom map. And because the Bloom map is archaic, no one even uses it. I'm probably the last person who actually is practicing that used the Bloom map 20 years ago because it's long been superseded by the State Seismic Hazard Map Act. But the Bloom map started off with a threshold of 20%. And if you are at 20%, then you must look at a subsequent map. And there's 100 of them, subsequent maps. You have a book. And so you go from the big map and you go to the little maps, and those little maps are a block by block zone of slide. So using the Bloom map at 20 or 25% is totally wrong. If you're going to use the Bloom map, you have to also use this 100 map text. Building department didn't have it. I had a copy of it. I've given a copy of my version of it. So if you want to use the Bloom map, you also have to set the threshold of these 100 micro slides. We know where they are. But those slides and the Bloom map have long since been superseded by the Seismic Hazard Map Act. So if you want to set a threshold today of 25%, this is a bag of sand. I can't get sand to slide at 25%. It slides at 25 degrees. So this percent and degrees have been confused. The correct number is 25 degrees. That's 50%. That's 2 to 1. That's the stability of sand, the weakest material in the city. So I think there's a confusion on percent versus degrees. And
Thank you very much. All right, are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 2? Okay, seeing none, the public comment is closed. Colleagues, what would you like to do with this item?
So, Madam Chair, this has been through staff. Obviously, the Bloom map is archaic, and this is an attempt to replace the Bloom map with some objective standards. I am not a structural engineer or a geotechnical engineer. This 25% number has now been through legal review and commission review. This is the first time I'm hearing that it should be degrees, not percent. The Bloom map was actually, as Mr. Buskovich said, 20%, not 20 degrees. But if, Mr. Strawn, you want to address this on the technical side, or Mr. Lowry, as to whether or not it should be 25 degrees as compared to 25%. 25% is a pretty darn steep slope in San Francisco. 25% grade is nothing I'd ride my bicycle up.
Supervisor, we can investigate this 25 degrees versus 25%.
All right. Madam Chair, in the interest of getting this right, I would ask for a 1-week continuance, and we'll work with the Department of Building Inspection. I would assume, insofar as your Building Inspection Commission actually has engineers and architects and builders on it, that they would have caught this, but why don't we take 1 week off and talk about it again in a week?
All right, thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Kim?
Nope. Now that we're continuing the item, I will wait until next week.
And
All right.
Madam Chair, if we could just
Supervisor
take the
Peskin, yes.
clarification amendment, that would be great.
Okay. All right, Supervisor Safai?
I want to thank the department for being here, but it would be good, Mr. Lauer, if you bring someone with the technical experience, as like you said, so we can have a little bit more pointed conversation about that. That would be helpful. Next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can we get a motion on first the amendment and then the continuance?
So I make a motion to accept the amendment as proposed,
Okay, we'll do that without objection.
and then I make a motion to continue this item through the call of the chair.
How about 1 week?
1 week.
Oh, 1 week.
All right, we can do that without objection. Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, can we please call item 3?
Item number 3 is an ordinance amending the planning code to extend the Lower Polk Street Alcohol Restricted Use District to June 1st, 2023, and making appropriate findings.
Thank you. And again, we have Supervisor Peskin, the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, the ordinance before you today extends the term of the Lower Polk Alcohol Restricted Use District for an additional 5 years. The district was established by my predecessor, Supervisor Chu, in 2013 to address the influx of new bars in the Lower Polk neighborhood and the community's desire to maintain a healthy balance of uses in that area. I want to give credit and acknowledgement to the stewardship of the Lower Polk Neighbors, which has been working with businesses and residents on this matter. You will note that it includes one clarification having to do specifically with the demolition of a building at 1331 Polk Street, which currently houses the Hemlock Tavern. And I am informed that the developer and property owner and the Hemlock Tavern have mutually agreed to allow this institution return to the building once it's reconstructed. So this makes an exception. And to that end, I have one small amendment, which is to use the word submitted rather than approved prior to January 1st of 2018, which again is for the Hemlock Tavern provision, and I will pass that out. I want to thank Planning Department staff, Mr. Starr, and the Commission for their work and the Commission's unanimous vote to recommend this to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Any questions, comments from colleagues? Okay, seeing none, public comment is open on item 3. Please come on. Oh, sorry. Aaron Starr from Planning Department.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Aaron Starr, Manager of Legislative Affairs. I'm just here to let you know that the Planning Commission heard this item on March 29th of this year and voted to adopt the proposed ordinance with modifications. The Commission's proposed modifications include: 1, replace the 1-year abandonment period with an 18-month abandonment period. 2, amend the ordinance to revise the January 1st, 2018 date so that the new exception to the abandonment provision can be used by the Hemlock Tavern. And 3, revise the ordinance so that the footnote for bar uses added to the Polk Street NCD table specifically identify Lower Polk Street RUD. We understand the supervisor is proposing these amendments for you today, and we'd like to thank the supervisor for doing that. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Okay, so now we will go to public comment. If you have any comments on item 3, please come on up.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Chris Shulman, Lower Polk Neighbors. I'll be very brief. The Restricted Use District is working, as noted in the staff report by Planning. I'd like to thank Supervisor Peskin for working with Lower Polk Neighbors on this. I'd like to thank the developer for working with Hemlock Tavern, and for all the parties for working on the Hemlock Tavern accommodation in this ordinance. I will cede the rest of my time for your long afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 3? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Colleagues, can we get a motion? Item 3.
Motion to move forward with positive recommendation.
Can you take the amendment?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm so
Amendment
sorry.
first.
I first make a motion to make the amendments that Supervisor Peskin so enumerated,
Okay, we'll do that without objection.
and then make a motion to move this forward with recommendation to the full board.
All right, and we'll do that without objection as well, as amended. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item 4, please.
Item number 4 is an ordinance amending Division 1 of the Transportation Code to establish a violation for motorized scooters that are a part of a motorized scooter share program and affirming the Planning Department's determination.
Thank you. Once again, we have Supervisor Peskin up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, the item before you today is, at least to my mind, an obvious and standard piece of the overall legislative package necessary to establish a permitting program for the new and proliferating business model of motorized or powered scooters. We're all familiar with this necessary legislative step because it's exactly what the board unanimously passed to permit and enforce basic regulations for dockless bicycles last year. As with the stationless bikes, we are once again ensuring that the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency creates a permit process for each company and giving the SFMTA administrative penalty powers, as well as giving our Public Works Department the power to enforce the sanctity and safety of our public space, particularly our sidewalks. The technical aspects of the legislation are not the only similarities from last year, and I really want to stress this because it's clear that many of these companies continue to build their corporate empires off of a basic premise: making massive profit always trumps protecting the public, and innovation is only possible by cutting corners. Everything, including public assets, are there to be privatized and monetized, even at the expense of our most vulnerable communities. And it's somehow the fault of local communities and their governments that they didn't think to monetize these public assets first. Our laws, the very foundation of our democracy, are here to be scoffed at, and San Francisco is only here to quite literally, pun intended, be given the bird by tech CEOs who jump from one company to the next after they overstay their welcome. The spin and bomb-throwing hysteria, apparently this is, according to a press release issued by one of the companies, an emergency meeting, which it is not. This is not emergency legislation. It was actually introduced a month and a half ago and has gotten here during the normal course of business. There's nothing extraordinary about it. And as I said, it is virtually identical to the legislation that we passed unanimously with regard to permitting of stationless bicycles. I represent a district with the highest concentration of low-income seniors in a city with one of the highest numbers of pedestrian collisions and fatalities in the state, if not the country. District 3 is the densest district in the city, with low-income neighborhoods like Chinatown that rely on ADA-accessible public transit and pedestrian travel, and we've invested countless millions into major infrastructure projects like the Polk Street Improvement Project, bus rapid transit on Van Ness, the Central Subway, and the list goes on. So when I see hyperbolic fallacies being spouted by CEOs about how every scooter that is dumped on our sidewalk is somehow one less car, and how seniors and pedestrians and parents walking their kids to school somehow just need to get over themselves and get out of the way of this life-changing, innovative machine, I frankly find it to be offensive and arrogant. In addition to hundreds of form letters generated by Bird and Lime, I have also, and I'm sure you have received hundreds of complaints, photos, videos, telephone calls, and emails from angry constituents who feel exactly the same way. So before we get into the actual policy issues with how these companies are operating, I will just say that the pretentious "we're saving the world" attitude and the outright bullying of organizations like Walk SF and Senior Disability Action, who frankly are doing important work to advocate for alternative modes of transit, is really not welcome, and I really hope that that behavior stops. As policymakers, we're tasked with balancing the competing needs of our public realm, and guess what? Private corporations are at the bottom of that priority list, especially since I have yet to see any of them actually do one thing to actually address our massive transportation infrastructure and operations deficit, nor take on the automobile industry. In fact, some of those companies are literally being financed by companies like Uber. It's very interesting. We're told that somehow Uber is a transit alternative that is decongesting our streets, even though we have the hard data prepared by the San Francisco County Transportation Authority that shows that at peak in some parts of the city, they are adding to 26% of the congestion. According to an article in TechCrunch, the cost of just one of these scooters is about $400 a piece. At an average of 5 rides per day and a lifetime of 300 uses, each scooter dies out in 2 months' time. By the way, only about 80 of those uses would actually be profitable to the company. When people complain about street junk being dumped on our city streets, they're closer to the truth than they know. All you need to do is see the photos of scooters piled up in heaps, as well as the ones that have been dumped into trash cans. I have a lot more to say, but colleagues, I would like to hear from the public, and I do have one small amendment that I have passed out at the suggestion of the city attorney to change motorized to powered, and those de minimis clarifications are in front of each member of the committee, and I will also provide that to our committee clerk. And with that, Madam Chair, I will turn it back over to you. I do want to say one other thing, which I will bring up tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors, which is at the same time that these scooter companies are resisting any regulation on the local level, they are lobbying the state assembly and actually got an assembly member to introduce an assembly bill that would effectively deregulate them by removing the helmet requirement, tripling the wattage from 250 to 750 watts, and increasing their speed by 33% to 20 miles an hour. And to what end? To further imperil our city's pedestrians and the users of these devices themselves.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, do we have any other further comments or questions? Okay, I think I'll save my I'm sorry? Okay, yeah, we're all going to save our comments until after public comment. And given the number of them, I will be limiting public comment to 1 minute per speaker, just so that we'll be able to make it through everyone. So I have a couple of comment cards here. If I call your name, please come on up. Timothy Waters, Kathy DeLuca. Oh, I'm sorry. We have MTA staff here. My apologies. I will still call a few comment cards so that folks can line up afterwards, but Kathy DeLuca, John Lowell, Fiona Hinsey, Fran Taylor, and Sam Draymond. So you can please line up by the drapes over there, and we have SFMTA staff here.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Tang, members of the committee, and to Supervisor Peskin for sponsoring this important legislation. So Jamie Parks with SFMTA oversee our Livable Streets division, which primarily deals with bicycle and pedestrian safety around the city. And so I'm happy to present this collaborative legislation today to amend Division 1 of the Transportation Code to address motorized scooter sharing programs, or as amended by Supervisor Peskin, powered scooter sharing programs. And I'll attempt to start using powered scooter in my remarks. We've been working very closely with the Board of Supervisors on this legislation, recognizing the important need for it. Particularly thank Supervisor Peskin for his leadership, and also Supervisor Kim and her office for their help as well. Okay. To start, whether it's bike share, car share, scooter share, or other sharing, MTA sees the interest in providing more mobility options to San Franciscans as a good thing. And to the extent that motorized scooters help to make our transportation system safer, more accessible, and more equitable, which are our guiding principles for our decisions, we support it. But as the supervisor mentioned, we have a lot of questions regarding the operations of scooters sharing in San Francisco. And so we're proceeding with a lot of caution as well as optimism. And so that's why this is a really important piece of legislation to make sure that motorized scooters are regulated in a manner that does promote public health and safety. I also want to mention that this Division 1 legislation to the Transportation Code is being complemented by Division 2 legislation that will be approved by the MTA Board of Directors. The Division 1 legislation prohibits stationless scooter sharing without a permit. The Division 2 legislation would actually lay out the details of that permitting process. And we expect to get to the MTA Board with that legislation on May 1st. So recognizing there's a lot of public comment, I'm not going to say a whole lot, but I do want to say that scooter sharing is new. It's launched in Santa Monica in 2017. 3 companies began operations in San Francisco in March, and we've also spoken to several other companies that have an interest in operating but have preferred to wait for a permit program to exist before launching. And so we recognize that there is a strong need to have this permitting program in place. And we've heard from a lot of members of the community since the companies have launched a couple weeks ago, primarily with regard to concern over the failure of the companies to comply with existing regulations prohibiting sidewalk riding and blocking pedestrian paths. But we've also heard a fair amount of excitement from a lot of users around having a new transportation choice. And so our goal from this permitting program and from this legislation is to capture the potential benefits of the program while eliminating the impacts. As I said, the Division 2 legislation would be heard by the MTA Board on May 1st. There's a lot of detail that was still being worked out, but overall, our 3 themes, as consistent with everything that we do, is first and foremost maintaining the safety of our pedestrian spaces, and so preventing sidewalks from being blocked by scooters, and also preventing sidewalk riding. Second is requiring data sharing with the city so that we can understand how scooters are operating, and requiring review of the company's privacy policies to ensure that the data that they're collecting from their customers are ensuring consumer protection. And then finally, a concern with equity and ensuring that the programs have affordable memberships for low-income users and encouraging providers to serve a wide geography. So in closing, the need for this legislation is clear, and the legislation is a great example of collaboration between the SFMTA and the Board of Supervisors. And overall, we're excited to support this legislation and ensure that any use of the public right-of-way is in the public interest, and that standard applies to private companies as well as everybody else. So with that, I think we're going to public comments, but also happy to take questions that you have.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin?
Madam Chair, I want to thank Mr. Parks and Director Riskin and the staff of the MTA for the collaborative spirit in which they've worked with my office and Supervisor Kim's office. And I want to underscore one thing that is very important, which is the legislation that is before us today was introduced on March the 7th and was introduced very publicly. It was actually reported in newspapers in San Francisco, and the various companies, and thank you, Mr. Parks, for pointing out that there are other companies who chose not to do this that are in the same business, chose several weeks thereafter to dump these on the streets of San Francisco, knowing full well that this day would come when we would be considering a regulatory scheme and a permitting scheme as we have in other instances of emerging shared mobility technology. So it is a little preposterous for these companies to now be hysterical and issuing breaking news press releases claiming that we're doing something that they didn't know about. It's been very public for 6 weeks. It's been very public actually since the days that we regulated segways on our public sidewalks a decade and a half ago.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Okay, so now we will go back to public comment. And I had some comment cards. I'm going to read one more time. Fran Taylor, Fiona Hinsey, John Lowell, Timothy Waters, Kathy DeLuca, and Sam Draymond. Again, we're going to have to reduce public comment to a minute each so that we'll be able to get through everyone today.
I'm Bob Planthold here as a member of Senior and Disability Action. I support and we support the idea of this legislation to deter the misuse This is simple regulation. It is not prohibition. And I'm saying deter misuse because there are occurring safety hazards, especially to seniors and people with disabilities. Recent stories have pictures that were in Hoodline by Carrie Sesto showing a scooter with its handle in a blue curb parking lane. So that means it's not really usable. Another picture by Steve Bracco showed a scooter blocking the mechanism to open the door to the Sony Metreon, meaning people with disabilities who don't have use of their hands and handles can't operate that mechanism. Finally, this weekend, I saw a family affix it to one of the mechanisms to inform the blind when they can cross, so they could stumble across it. There's hazards, risks, dangers for people with disabilities by the misuse, and I think this legislation would help. Go.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Fiona Hansey, representing Independent Living Resource Center, who's also a member of the Senior and Disability Work Group of the Vision Zero Coalition. We stand in strong support of regulation of these scooters, primarily for the fact that of the path of travel being blocked for those who use mobility devices and seniors and people who use mobility devices. For example, when a person in a power chair might encounter one of these scooters, they may have to swerve quickly to avoid accidents. Also, hundreds of these scooters piled up in the same place may block the loading and unloading for people using vehicles such as paratransit and accessible vans. We believe that more regulation is necessary, but that this legislation.
Thank you very much. All right, next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Tim Waters. I'm speaking on behalf of Young Community Developers, a workforce development organization in Bayview Hunters Point. And just very briefly, I come to support specifically Lime Bike and their initiatives that they're doing in Bayview. We've been working with them since 2017. They're very supportive of our mission. 2 points I want to highlight. One, proactively, they are working with us and have actually hired folks from our community into their operations team. Work is fun, but more importantly, contributes to the growth of Bayview Hunters Point. Secondly, in a comment that I heard a few seconds ago, they actually are working on and will be rolling out low-income solutions for folks in the community, so that helps remove that barrier. So in sum, we're here to support the scooter program, specifically as Lime Bike has articulated. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is John Lowell. Under your approval, I served for 10 years on the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee representing the pedestrian safety needs of those who are vulnerable, children, seniors, and people with disabilities. And from a personal perspective, I also approach you to seek your approval of this as a committee for the whole Board of Supervisors to vote on, as it was 17 years ago. I sustained many injuries when I was hit at the intersection in San Francisco of 14th and Mission. So those many points combined, I emphasize the great importance to you of passing this regulation ordinance to ensure that we improved safety on the sidewalks of all pedestrians, and particularly those of us who are vulnerable to such collisions. So please approve this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Kathy DeLuca. I'm the Policy and Program Director at Walk San Francisco, and I'm here today to urge you to regulate these scooter companies. The scooters do have the potential to be part of our transportation system, and we have to see how that will play out. But what we do know is happening right now is that pedestrians on our sidewalk are not safe. These vehicles can go up to 15 miles an hour, and they're being ridden all over our sidewalks. And sidewalks are the one place in the city where people don't have to dodge vehicles, and it needs to stay that way. Walk SF has been receiving a lot of criticism in the past week, saying that we're not focusing on the real danger on our streets, which is cars. And I will tell you that every single day of my job, I fight for Vision Zero. I fight for safer streets, as does all of Walk San Francisco. Fighting for street safety and fighting for sidewalk safety are not mutually exclusive. The city can do more than two things at once. So, and we need a system to regulate these companies because clearly they're not self-regulating. So thank you.
My name is Fran Taylor, and I support this legislation. I've heard the companies and their supporters whining, what about the homeless encampments? This is a total false equivalency. A tent on a sidewalk is a cry of desperation. Somebody whizzing along at 15 miles an hour, that's a symbol of entitlement and arrogance. And I think that these scooters run amok are actually a plot of the young people to kill off all us old farts so they can have our rent-controlled apartments.
Thank you. I had only called a couple of speaker cards earlier, but I see a lot more in line, so I'm going to call the other speaker cards here. Queena Chen, Rodney Hampton,
Yes.
Dorothy Williams, Gail Macy, Valerie Higgins, and Harold Kiter. Please.
Good
come up.
afternoon, supervisors, and thank you for having us. My name is Rodney Hampton Jr., Vice President of We Help Our People, a civic and social organization in Bayview Hunters Point. I'm here with representatives of Bayview Hunters Point Oakdale Latino community, the Hunters View senior community, members of CSEP, and church members of the Bayview Hunters Point. We're in support definitely of Lime bike, Lime scooters. I hear people's concerns of definitely the sidewalks. You have the garbage cans on the sidewalks, you got illegal dumping, you got a number of things, feces from the dogs and cats and stuff. The city has developed a number of policies, a number of groups, and set with small settings to actually fix situations like this. And I believe Lime Bike, Lime Scooters is definitely willing and hearing people's concerns and willing to work with the city to make and address those concerns in a safety and a fashionable way. Again, Lime Bike Scooters is in the community. They are doing a fantastic job. They have been at several events, Sunday Street, Caesar's.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming up as a group. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Randall Deedle. I'm a District 5 resident. Pay-per-minute scooter users aren't going to pay 50 cents for 3 minutes to go out of the way to avoid one-way busy sidewalks. Second, independent contractor chargers that these companies are using are allowed to charge 10 scooters at a time while they sleep. Online, I've seen people mention that they're charging 30 scooters in their apartments. I believe this puts the greater community at risk for fires from daisy chain power strips. I don't have 10 suitable outlets in my apartment, let alone 30. Third, I don't think it's a safe product to be shared. I've seen a number of Lime scooters broken in half and bird and spin scooters with broken handlebars. If I get on a shared scooter, how do I know that the user before me didn't misuse it in a way that puts me at risk? Fourth, like I said, these are consumer-grade products, not designed for shared use, and electric, potentially e-waste, isn't a sustainable form of alternative transportation. When we see piles of bike shares in China, those are recyclable and aren't full. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Andrew Lee. I'm a resident of San Francisco. I support the continued presence of dockless scooters in San Francisco. I rely on them actually as my primary mode of transportation. I do not own a car. Before scooters, I would take a Lyft or an Uber or a Zipcar, so contrary to what Supervisor Peskin said, every scooter ride I take actually does remove a car from the streets. I hope any legislation does not reduce the availability of these scooters in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Antonio DeWalk. I'm an Oakland native. I've been commuting into the city pretty much my entire professional life. I've taught summer camps at Crocker Amazon. I worked at City College, saved City College during the accreditation crisis. So I come from a multivariable commuter perspective. I'm here today to speak in support of bird scooters and Lime scooters and against this regulation. Like most commuters, I think we have a crisis in this city, and I think we need to be progressive and realize that there is no silver bullet to this crisis and that we need to have a kaleidoscope solution, which is a proud tradition of the city. So I'm here to speak in support of that. So I would ask these supervisors to please channel that progressive mindset and understand that including the creative ways of thinking into the rich tapestry of the city is the way that we have gotten here. We're very proud of that tradition in the Bay Area, specifically in San Francisco. So Supervisor Peskin, I hope that you understand there are lots of people out here who think this is a creative solution that can absolutely forward this city, and I hope you take that into account and not reactively legislate, and instead progressively look forward to how we can improve this city in our transportation crisis. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Next speaker, please.
My name is Sam Malika. I am a resident of the city, and I've been using the scooters for the last month for my work commute. I would usually use an Uber. I'm certainly aware that not all scooter users have been well behaved, but I have been able to mind the rules of the road and park in appropriate, safe places. I agree that we shouldn't have people riding these scooters on the sidewalks, just as we shouldn't have bicycles, tents, needles, or human waste on our sidewalks, all of which I encountered on my way here. I didn't encounter any scooters on my way here. I believe that with existing laws, we can enforce these issues. At the moment, the scooter sharing concept is wildly misunderstood, but is desperately needed in our city. Just one parking space can fit over 24 e-scooters, and a single e-scooter can carry multiple users to and from their destination with zero emissions. I know that with the right approach, we can make e-scooter sharing a symbiotic relationship for the riders, providers, and our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Sam Dryman. I'm here on behalf of Lime Bike. First, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to discuss this legislation. We look forward to a fair and transparent process that balances the real and serious concerns of the public with the many transportation benefits that electric scooters bring. Lime has implemented a robust community outreach and education program that includes community-based organizations as well as groups that represent disabled communities. We have hired locally and been supportive of and participants in local community-based events. We continue to view the City and County of San Francisco as partners in this effort and want to work collaboratively to craft solutions that meaningfully address safety and right-of-way issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sherry Matza, Western Edition. I'm rather amazed by the arrogance and elitism I've heard here today. It's astounding, and I'm really very, very distressed. Supervisor Peskin was right. We have a situation here where the arrogance, and you all should know better, and you all, quite frankly, should have been preparing this a long time ago. And what are you doing about skateboards? Just the other day, 3 guys on skateboards came toward me on the sidewalk. One of them flipped their skateboard, hit me in the leg. I was momentarily paralyzed. I think I'm going to go back, live in the 1850s, and I'm going to hitch my horse up somewhere and see how the scooter's like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Theodore Lawrence III. I'm just here representing, I'm a Bayview resident. I just want to say as a young person out here living in the city and trying to make ends meet that these new companies that are coming around are providing a huge revolution for us as young people. It provides us, especially with the jump bikes, to get across the city easily and stuff like that. And then the scooters allow us to get from place to place within the smaller confines of like downtown area. And they also are providing more work opportunities for us young people who are interested in the tech field. And as you can see, the world itself is being revolutionized by the tech, even over in China and stuff like that. They've got a whole huge bike share program. But the scooters are providing us with ways to make money because they have a charger program and help with gentrification, because a lot of people in these lower income cities are having a hard time with like a lot of the new stuff that's coming up, and this just provides us to fully integrate as one with this. And it's just the beginning stages, and I think that you guys should work with it. Yeah, huge ability for it.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Sammy Elgendi, and I just came here to say that I'm from San Francisco. As a native, I can see both the problem of seeing those scooters kind of just entrapping people, just blocking the sidewalks and riding all over them. But the thing is, that's a problem of misdirection and miscommunication, being that The company has only had a couple of weeks to deal with this, and there's a lot of initiatives in place already and procedures that I can think of off the top of my head that they probably already have in place, such as putting cameras on the scooters to see where they're parked, putting very more exact GPS, and if they want to make them heavier if you want to make them faster so people can't pick them up, and put them in different places, like throw them in the garbage, as you said. Now, the thing about that is that people have seen these as new toys, and they ride them on the sidewalk. Now, with these new toys, there's a lot of things that come with them, such as, like, putting different measures in place, like shipping a helmet with every single person, every single scooter.
Thank you. I apologize. Okay, next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Adam. Thanks for doing what you guys do. Please help move us in a direction of moving away from car ownership and car ridership. I really love our city. I love cities as a whole. I think they'd be much better with more pedestrians, more people on bikes, and more people on scooters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. J.R. Epler, President, Potrero Boosters Neighborhood Association. The Potrero neighborhoods are a rapidly developing mixed-use neighborhood, and we are looking for any option to get away from a car that we can, but those options need to be regulated for the safety of the riders, the users of that product, and for the other modes of transportation. We're in support of this legislation. We're also in support of development. There was a comment about the city being progressive and accepting new forms of development. The clearest way to get reactive legislation is to shoot first and ask questions later, which is what's happened in this circumstance. This transit revolution, I work with the SFMTA on a number of issues. They're very open to new ways of getting around. There are a number of policies out there that are actively disincentivizing car ownership. Let's create a level playing field for our new technologies and not a playing field that will reward those that disregard our laws and disregard and harm those companies that do follow our laws. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name's Karen Fishkin. I'm part of Senior and Disability Action's Transit Justice Program. And I want to remind you what's going on our sidewalks already. Garbage cans, fire hydrants, parking meters, light posts, street signs, street trees, which I happen to love, parking signs, magazine stands, mailboxes, benches, bus stop shelters, and sometimes people on bicycles. They're very busy, filled spaces already, and pedestrians are kind of feeling like we're getting left out in the cold. We've been down here before to discuss with you Segway, robots on the street, and now scooters. And I don't say ban scooters, but I think they need to be regulated, and the use of sidewalks by pedestrians needs to be the highest priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Alice Rogers. I'm a part of the Vision Zero Coalition, and I'm president of the South Beach Rincon Mission Bay Neighborhood Association, though I'm speaking for myself. I support the resolution to adopt some regulations. However, I hope this is really just the first of a more complete package, whether it's Supervisor Yee's Innovation Task Force, or if it's more forward-looking traffic demand management principles. We need comprehensive regulation for all of these wheels, but I really hope we can find equal opportunities for all of these different modes of mobility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Matt Brzezina. I'm one of the organizers of the People Protected Bike Lane. What we do is we stand on the line that separates unprotected bike lanes from the car lane and keep Ubers and other cars out of the bike lane. I think it's interesting that we're here today with the Land Use Committee, and we should be talking about how do we adapt our city for our climate future. 46% of San Francisco's greenhouse gases are from transportation. Supervisor Kim, you've said in the past our zoning is how we think a healthy city should look. If you look at our city tells me that you should be driving. We should be supporting these new types of transportation. They should be regulated, but you need, as Land Use Committee, create more protected bike lanes and more parking and storage for these vehicles, and do it quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick. All right, and if we can, we need to refrain from making applause or any other comments, so if you could just use your spirit fingers, as we like to call it here in the chamber. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Quina. I'm a San Francisco native, and I'm part of the Chinatown Transit Research Improvement Project. I'm here to support the ordinance because, as Supervisor Peskin said, there's a lot of, Chinatown is like really crowded already. So if you guys have been on Stockton Street, you'll know it's kind of like a football field. So just imagine your grandparents trying to go buy groceries for dinner and not being able to get back home because there's a scooter in the way or they fall or trip. I think Scoot, the moped company, is a really great company for the power scooters to look at. Their model is actually, I think, one of the best models they have in the city. They restrict where you could park certain mopeds, and they also require members to take training classes, in-person training classes for etiquette, road etiquette and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker,
My
please.
name's Moses. I'm basically a martial arts instructor over in Visitation Valley, and this company right here, Bird, has helped me supplement my income here in San Francisco to allow me to continue being a positive influence in the community. I just asked, I'm all for regulation, but the company's treated me very well and treated my friends very well and has paid us excellent for the work that we do, and we do work hard and we make sure everything's safe. I do, and I know a lot of my friends. We make sure that things are safe. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a number of speaker cards here, but I think everyone's going out of order, so I'm no longer going to call the speaker card. So just come on up then.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Joel Villazon, and I've been a charger for Birds since March 25th. This extra income really helps feed my family. With the expensive cost of living here in San Francisco, every penny counts. As a native of San Francisco, I see the need for the Bird scooters for commuting in this congested city of only 49 square miles. I also want to apologize for any difficulties our Birds present to the public, and we will do whatever we can to make things better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is David Nunez, and I'm a charger for Bird. Bird has also helped me supplement my incomes due to the large cost of living in the Bay Area. I hear a lot of things that people are saying about negative aspects of how people are treating the scooters, but yet that can be done with any vehicle or any scooter or any bike or anything. It's about the person itself who is in charge of it to put it away, to put it in the correct place, to leave it away from people that are handicapped. So I feel that, of course, regulations are needed. Of course, everything needs to be in order for the community to be in a safe space. But this is creating jobs. This is creating people's transportation easement to work and home. It's also getting people out and about and not just sitting at home on their cell phones. So there's too many positives and very little cons in order for you guys to just bite on it so hard. Let's regulate it, let's get it organized, and let people create more jobs in the community, get rid of vehicles that are actually killing people. I've never seen a scooter-on-scooter accident kill somebody. So I think there should be more scooters on the road and less.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Justin Job, and I'm a resident here in the city. San Francisco is a city of innovation and is a leader of not only California, but of the world. Back in the 1800s, before the invention of cars, pedestrians were the main users of roads, and we all know that that is not the case presently. And what a lot of people don't know is that the public had to be educated not to walk on roads and to stay on the sidewalks. This is a public education problem, and the users of scooters need to be educated where to park and ride the scooters, and if they don't follow the laws, they should be given citations. We need to balance the new with the old and move forward as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, supervisors. My name is Alex Escalante. I'm a native, born and raised San Franciscan, and I've started using these scooters now for pretty much since they first came out. I use them every day, and that is every day, one day that I don't ride into the city. I just think that it's great that you're making a permitting process for these companies, but I hope that you don't ban or in any way charge them any kind of money for the process from now till May 1st, because they're just operating a business, and I'm using it every day. So thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, supervisors. My name is Zachary Smith. I've been a resident of North Beach since 1983, and for the last 5 years, I have basically not have to drive a car anymore in San Francisco because of electric scooters. For the last 5 days, I've been using Bird scooters, and I've become a charger. It's supplemented my income, and it's actually made me able to stay in San Francisco. So it's not just a transportation issue, it's also an affordability issue. And I would hope the city would take that into account as well. And of course, I'm for the safe use of any type of transportation. If it's banned from the sidewalk, then people shouldn't use the sidewalk. And I do wear a helmet, and I do use Birds where I'm supposed to. And I like it. It's really a good solution. It's helping San Francisco, and they don't pollute. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Brian No, and I'm with Spin. Just wanted to introduce ourselves and express our commitment to being good partners with our home city. We began deploying our small batches of scooters about a few weeks ago, but our work to be as forthcoming and transparent as possible with the city began in early February when we reached out to the MTA and we provided them our plans and make sure that nothing in our plans would conflict with any existing local and state laws. And that is when we decided to proceed. Since then, we've been just as responsive and transparent with our partners here in the city to make sure that they get regular updates on our data. And we commit going forward to work collaboratively, not only with the MTA, but also with the board. And we'd love to be a resource should you have any questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is Katie Ruby. I'm a resident of District 2, and I represent the residents who are just trying to find an efficient way to get around the city. I love living in San Francisco, but transportation is the most frustrating element. I work just over a mile from where I live, and yet it consistently takes me over 30 minutes to get to work, and I've experimented with many modes of transportation, both public and private. I've recently been using Bird to commute, and it's cut my commute in half at a very affordable price point. Beyond saving significant time for many commuters, the cumulative effect of scooters throughout the city will cut down on traffic congestion and emissions in our city. I should mention as well that I'm a civil environmental engineer and I care deeply about the sustainability of our city. I understand the importance of proper regulation to ensure scooters stay out of the right-of-way, but this proposal goes too far. Most riders, including myself, take great effort to ride in the bike lane and park scooters out of the way and follow all traffic laws. So we should be allowed to continue to utilize this great form of sustainable urban transportation. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Damir Bachirovich. I'm a resident of the Marina. I think it's important for everyone to realize what technological trends are actually enabling this to become a viable service. I think the most important thing to understand is how battery costs are trending. The rise of personal mobility vehicles is something that we are only at the early stages of. I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit to having a shared transportation service around e-bikes and e-scooters. And I urge you guys to consider working collaboratively with these companies. The consequence, I feel, is that consumers will start to purchase these vehicles themselves. We'll see streets more littered than ever with personal devices, and we won't have the parking infrastructure, the bike lanes, the scooter lanes to deal with it. It's going to be much more easy to truly understand the impacts of these services if we work with companies that operate these vehicles en masse. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. John DeCastro, Potrero Boosters Neighborhood Association Transportation Advocate. A couple of things. First of all, my wife was riding her stair lift down our front stairs on Sunday as 4 Bird scooters came up in tandem up the sidewalk and almost hit her as she got off her stair lift. There are problems with people using these things on the sidewalk. The devices should be available. And also, by the way, Lime is not a very good neighbor. We've asked them a number of times to remove scooters, and they haven't removed them for days. I think DPW finally got them. Devices only available. Approved sidewalk street furniture is one place. Bike racks or similar devices. There should be places to park these things that are designated, even if it's just paint on the sidewalk. Because, for example, I had 2 jump bikes in my driveway attached to a parking pole that took me 4 hours to get rid of. And that was at least a good response by Jump Bike. So, I mean, there needs to be more regulation around what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. And if any other members of the public wanted to speak on this item, just please feel free to line up by the far wall there. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Jeremy Lynch. I am a small business owner, and I've been in San Francisco for 3 years. I moved from Denver. I'm in a proud neighborhood of Noe Valley. That being said, for me, my small business thrives on me figuring out ways to make sure that I can get money so that I can invest in that and continue to grow my dream. San Francisco is a city that I moved to because it's a city of dreams, it's a city of inspiration. It's a city that collaborates with its community, its government, its business, and its people. And I am here to encourage you today, taking time out of me focusing on my business, to simply say that as a citizen who's used Bird, as someone who's seen my cost in traveling to different locations, the efficiency of these different scooters within the city has really allowed me to thrive in a matter of 3 weeks and decrease my cost, which in a city that is very costly is significant, not only to my being here as a city, but to the future of what we are as a city, what we're telling others, and how we work together to accomplish something great and really showcase and develop legislation for the entire U.S. to see how it's done. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Louis, and I'm new to the city. I'm a new resident to San Francisco and to California. Came over from the East Coast. And one of the greatest things about San Francisco that I love that made me stay here was the fact that you adapt to the new technology that comes out. This is a great technology that actually saves me money. I actually had to deal with the fact that I parked my car in the garage where I paid $350 to park and high insurance. So this ability to not have to remove my car or to wonder, or to think about someone busting my window open every time I park it somewhere is the best ability to have to be able to take these scooters and utilize this instead of actually driving my car or worrying about my bicycles being stolen, as a couple of my other individuals who live in the same apartment have lost both of their bicycles. So this is a great ability to be able to move around the city, and that's why I love San Francisco, is for the way that you adapt to technology. So please adapt to this one, because I think it's definitely useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Eugene. I just wanted to say that San Francisco is a very progressive city and one of the most progressive cities in the world. This technology with the scooters, it's very new. I understand that with each new technology that we have to figure out a way to find common ground. And I believe that if we find common ground in regulations, that this will be very good for the city as far as improving and moving forward the way that we're going as far as the economy and the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. DeAnthony Jones. I'm a resident of District 5. I do want to say that Lime Bike has been very proactive to even come into the residents of our community, especially in low-income areas and oftentimes overlooked areas. I am interested in seeing how this industry evolves, and I do think regulation is logical, but the regulations itself have to be as well. I do think that there has to be a discussion around street infrastructure as well, because some of the streets, it is hard to ride these scooters on, so I could see the temptation to ride on the sidewalks, and that's why I also feel like we need more protected bike lanes as well. And also, just to, as an aside, economic opportunities have grown because of Lime Bike, especially talking about charging programs for low-income residents to pick up some of the scooters and charge. And I do think that there is a future of this industry, but we just have to be smart with how we approach it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Brandon Brown, Bayview resident and business owner in San Francisco. Also the former GM of Bike and Roll, so I remember when these contracts for ride shares came out. And I think that the real issue here is the docking stations and picking up of the bikes, like the gentleman just said here earlier. And also the real issue here is cars, not scooters and bikes. The city, from what I've seen so far over the past 7 years, revolves around a cycling culture, bike coalition, so on and so forth. So I think that when we're thinking about bringing these scooter companies and these bike companies in, we should think about the actual culture around San Francisco and what we want to portray to the rest of the state, even the nation. So that we're progressive and we're trying to cut our carbon emissions down and bring these new companies in. And we should open up the bidding, multiple bidding contracts, not just one in the city, but multiple contracts for docking, which would, I think, solve a lot of the problems that we have with these vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And again, if anyone else wants to speak on this item, just please come and line up by the drapes.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Carl Hansen with Bird. First, I want to say I think we share a lot of the same goals. San Francisco has the laudable target of getting to 80% of trips being non-automotive by 2030. And in order for that to happen, rides are going to have to shift to some new technologies. And we think we found something that can really help with that goal. That said, we do absolutely empathize with the concerns of the community. We do not want to see riders riding dangerously on sidewalks or riding on sidewalks at all, parking on sidewalks in ways that present a hazard. We had good conversations this week with Supervisor Kim's office, with Walk San Francisco, and have set up some new ways of addressing this, including taking a photo, requiring riders to take a photo at the end of each ride, demonstrating that they have parked safely. We're adding a no riding on sidewalks rule to each bird. And we also want to ensure that this is a robust conversation, and would love to meet with anyone in your districts. Finally, our only concern here is we support the regulations. We understand the need for requiring a permit. We just need to have those permits available and have the opportunity to apply for those permits. So it's just a matter of timing for us. So if you can allow a window for us to continue to operate, that is all that we need. And in that time, we want to share data with you. We want to meet with neighborhood groups and have a robust discussion so that San Francisco can have the best regulations in the country on dockless scooters. Thank you.
Mr. Hansen.
Thank you, Supervisor
me.
Peskin.
What day did you first start to deploy these mechanisms on the streets of San Francisco?
It was just after St. Patrick's, so I think it was the 20th.
Patrick's Day.
It was after that weekend. So I think Lime launched first, and then Spin. I don't know if any of the reps are here. And then we launched shortly thereafter.
And were you aware that the legislation that's being considered by this committee was pending at that time?
Correct. So we'd actually been in conversations with multiple parties in the city of San Francisco, waiting for the permit process to come forward. We saw some of our competitors launch, and then we decided to introduce a pilot. We received a letter from the MTA at that point asking some questions about our operations, which we replied to. Given the current rules, we're operating within the law, and we're excited to work on that permit process with the city and put in regulations that address the safety concerns of the community.
And Mr. Hansen, are you aware that the legislation that we are considering today is not being considered pursuant to any emergency provisions of the charter or city law?
I'm aware.
And are you aware that your company released a press release saying the opposite?
If we had bad intel on that, I apologize for that. I think the situation is an emergency for us if we're required to have a permit that does not yet exist, and that's why we have some.
Well, an emergency for you is not an emergency. In your press release, you equated our promulgating this law to give the Transportation Authority the ability to set forth a permitting scheme with reasonable regulations akin to the steps that we would take after a major earthquake. Does that not seem hyperbolic to you?
Again, if we had bad intel in that situation, I apologize for that. But
what do you mean if?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, here we are. What's the if part?
I agree with you. As proposed, it is not an emergency ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Peskin, sorry. I'm going to actually ask Mr. Hansen if you can stay.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of questions.
Wonderful.
And so I want to get through public comment first, and then we're all going to ask questions.
I
Supervisor
just have
Peskin.
one last question, which is, are you aware that during the course of this hearing, we have received and you have received a cease and desist order from the city attorney of the city and county of San Francisco for nuisance violations?
I read it. The attachment we received didn't have page 2, so I have not read the whole thing, but would love to see the full letter.
It was resent to you with the missing page.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please stay, and we have more questions for you after public comment. I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please. And again, if anyone else is here, or I don't know if we have an overflow room, please come on up.
Hi, I'm Tim Seward. I'm from Excelsior. Grew up in San Francisco.
an avid skateboarder, and I ride two-stroke mopeds all around the city. And I also wear a prosthetic leg. I had cancer when I was a kid, born with cancer, lost my leg. And Bird, I support it. I think it's awesome. Being a San Francisco resident, I just think that we need to have better regulations on it and not leave the bikes on the sidewalk and ride on the sidewalk, which I actually made that mistake of riding on the sidewalk. But now that I know that that might be illegal, I think we should just be a little bit more informative of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Adel Saad. I'm a Bay Area native, but I've come into the city since I was young and played chess on Market Street. The first time I rode Bird on the Embarcadero from Splunk to the BART station, I didn't think Bird, I thanked San Francisco.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Elgren. I'm an independent operations and technology consultant. I've ridden Ford Go Bike more than 200 times, jump more than 20 times, and have done a handful of e-scooter rides. I support progressive, flexible legislation for e-scooter electric scooters in San Francisco. A couple of points that I think are really important are around access, number one. So I think a Clipper card access to all scooters in San Francisco so that people can access the scooters without a credit card is extremely important. I also think the legislation should encompass lean operations principles in order to ensure that scooter share can survive and thrive, particularly reporting metrics around the accessibility of the scooters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm from San Francisco. I'm actually for Bird and Lime. And one thing I really want to point out, it sounds like the resolution everyone is discussing is possibly requiring people to ride on bike lanes, but a lot of roads in San Francisco, the entire Bay Area, is actually some of the worst roads in America. I'm not sure if riding in these lanes are possible. I tried riding in these lanes before, and you have to go around them. Very easy for bikes and cars to easily go over these potholes and dents, but it's really hard for someone on one of these scooters. Also, regarding helmets, there's a lot of states that don't require people on motorcycles to ride helmets. I'm not sure why we would, at going 15 miles an hour. Also, being in bike lanes makes scooters way more vulnerable to bigger injuries. When we're talking about pedestrians and accidents in traffic in San Francisco, pedestrian traffic issues has been the lowest in the last 7 years, and actually historically has been the lowest in San Francisco history in 2017. So that's something to be conscious of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. Jessica Lehman with Senior and Disability Action. Our members, seniors and people with disabilities, have talked for decades about being nervous about bicycles on sidewalks. And of course, scooters are so much more dangerous that our seniors and disabled folks know that if somebody gets hit or trips over a scooter that's left on a sidewalk, they're going to end up in the hospital. There may be complications. People may or may not go home. Also, when scooters are parked on the edge of the sidewalk, that blocks parking access for someone trying to get out of an accessible van or a paratransit van. The results that we know of for seniors and people with disabilities is people don't go out and they isolate themselves. This is as serious as it sounds. So we need to regulate scooters. We need to make sure that companies are following local and state laws. We need to make sure we have a plan to keep people safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Frisch. I'm a resident of the Mission. I want to second what Matt Brazina said earlier. Let's focus our regulations on building the protected bike lane and bikes and scooter parking infrastructure needed to encourage zero-emission modes of transportation like dockless bike share and scooters to be able to ride safely on the road. Studies show that the more bikes and scooters on the road lead to safer rides for all active transport riders, and helmet laws end up discouraging those riders. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Evelyn, and I am speaking also on behalf of seniors and people with disabilities. And I find the tenor of this conversation a bit scary because we are just a few speakers I've heard speak up. The rest are another generation and go, 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 and that's fine, fine, fine. But with all the go, 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 there's more things to fall over, and it's terribly, terribly frightening. And I would say to all of us, beware the unforeseen outcomes and consequences of rushing into things. Thank you so much for giving this a lot of sensitive thought.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manish. So I'm here on behalf of Talking with Birds. So March 25th was the day I was trying to move out of the San Francisco because the living cost over here was pretty high. And since I got a chance to work with birds, it really kind of changed my mind. And I was making like a good money, so I'm not no more moving from San Francisco. As a writer, so it is helping me to save my time. And then it's really convenient, it's useful. So only the issue is we're having about the sidewalks. So if we follow the rules and maintain a strict laws, so I think it's a really good idea. And many of the tourists I have seen in the street, they are being able to go around in the city in like a short time. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And any other members of the public, again, last call for public comment.
Yes, hi, my name is Jack Strong. I'm speaking on behalf of the Bird organization as a writer and not the young go-go generation and a general contractor. Sometimes I need to get from place to place downtown 5-6 blocks at a time, and the convenience of the Birds since they've come up has just been very helpful for me. I mean, I could get on it, go to another meeting, back and forth, not having to call an Uber cab or anything else. I mean, it's very convenient for me, and I've seen how the city has adopted these scooters, and I think it's a very good opportunity for San Francisco and for the general community. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Weingart. I'm the general counsel of a company you probably haven't heard of called Waybots, which was the first company that was permitted under the DC Bike and e-scooter share program. I just want to highlight that our company is one that did not launch first and comply later, so I want to get that on the record. We're willing to work with policymakers, business leaders, community leaders, everybody under the sun to make sensible regulation a reality. I would like to also underscore that Bird, Lime Bike, Spin, and others don't speak for the entire industry, so I'm urging you to permit vigorous competition to allow the cream to rise to the top, which I believe firmly that we will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Todd Rincon Hill. I have a gift for the investor who put $300 million into this and let it be rolled out the way it is. Clearly, they have a bump on the head. There is no place on the sidewalk for any of these vehicles in my neighborhood. They're taking up all of the bike parking, so Postmates, deliveries, and friends have no place to park. And worst of all, I think the whole thing just reeks of classism and ableism. And I think the more people that ride Muni, the better that'll get, because people will demand it get better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, if any other members of the public wish to speak on this item, please come on up.
Hello, my name is Calvin Quick. I'm a resident of San Francisco. I was not going to speak at this hearing, at this meeting. When I saw this item on the agenda, I didn't think it was going to be a particularly consequential item. But I'd just like to remark that it seems to me like what I perceive to be evasive scare tactics used by these companies belie their professed interest in pursuing a productive discussion on the regulation of this new industry. So I'd just like to make that clear as what I perceive this situation to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Quick. All right. Any other members of the public wish to comment on this hearing? Anyone in another, I don't know if we have an overflow room. We don't. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to close public comment. And I know that we have many more questions and comments to make. I'll start with Supervisor Kim. And so I'm so sorry. I walked in midway through the
Public
Mr. Hansen.
commenter?
Mr. Hansen.
Of course, I picked the farthest seat back. Apologies.
And so I'm sorry. I'm actually just trying to pull up all of the paperwork from my office.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm so sorry. Can you move to Supervisor Peskin? while we Sure, get it on?
Supervisor
Peskin.
I did appreciate Mr. Hansen's mention that Byrd is now requiring individuals to send a photograph at the end of a ride showing that the scooter was properly parked pursuant to existing law. I wanted to offer a suggestion, and this is really outside of the scope of this legislation, because this legislation is really a high-level permitting authority to the agency that governs the use of our streets. But the notion, and this is actually not my idea, it came from a constituent, that you receive a photograph prior to the ride showing that the individual has a helmet. I know that my experience is not unique, which is that, and I'm hazarding a guess, upwards of 90% of the individuals I see using these are not only on the sidewalks, they are without a helmet. I was very pleased this morning to see on Columbus Avenue 2 individuals actually riding in the street, both of them without a helmet. And me and my colleagues are actually responsible for 2 hospitals in San Francisco General and Laguna Honda. And when you have a closed head injury, you end up in one of our hospitals. And if you don't have good insurance, the taxpayers end up paying for it, not to mention the tragedy to the individual and their families. So insofar, I was actually taken aback that there were members of the public who spoke against common sense safety regulations like the use of helmets. I was kind of shocked by that. And by the way, that's not our law. That is state law, albeit I note that these companies, or some of these companies, have been behind the Assembly bill to actually remove the helmet requirement, which seems to be pretty reckless. But I would suggest that you consider, and that the MTA consider, requiring as a permit condition a photograph of the individual with a helmet prior to their ability to unlock the device. What says Mr. Hansen?
Well, I'll say we do take wearing helmets and safety very seriously. I think we were the first company that offers a free helmet directly through the app to any rider that requests one. We have messaging both on the scooters and in the app stating that, wear a helmet, it's the law. Regarding the state legislation, that's intended to match the riding rules and regulations of these scooters with Class 2 electric bicycles. So similar helmet requirements, speed, and wattage. The purpose behind that is to create some clarity for users, cities, for everybody to understand these are vehicles that behave in a similar fashion, and they should have the same regulations.
And then relative, and I say this, and I appreciate Mr. Parks from the MTA also addressing the issue of consumer data privacy, which in the age of Cambridge Analytica and Mr. Zuckerberg testifying for 2 days in front of the United States Congress the other day are paramount and on, I think, everybody's mind. So I was wondering, Mr. Hansen, if you could regale us with Byrd's privacy policies.
Yeah, so we take privacy and data very seriously. That said, I think we're interested in entering into the city with a data sharing procedure analogous to what's currently required under the dockless bike share permit, ensuring that data is anonymized, but also allowing the city and MTA to understand how these scooters are being used and how we can best fit into the existing transportation network here in San Francisco.
So reading through Byrd's privacy policy, it indicates that the app collects personal and non-personal information, but what qualifies as non-personal information Well, hold on a second here. This is the one that actually really got me. It says Bird says it may partner with third-party advertising companies which may use cookies alone or in conjunction with web beacons or other tracking technologies to collect information about you. What do you think about that, Mr. Hansen?
We have no existing partnerships or plans to partner with advertisers.
But yet, anytime anybody unlocks one of those things through your app, they've given you that permission.
So, again, there is no existing partnership or planned partnerships with any advertising companies, and we've stated on the record, our CEO has said it, that's not in the future for this company.
Well, your company said that this was an emergency hearing, and it's not. But as a condition of getting a permit, would you reverse that?
I would be
policy?
happy to speak with our team about that.
All right, I will yield the floor.
And we will get back to all of the supervisors on that.
And let me ask you this. Do you know if you or anybody on your behalf reached out to any policymaker on this Board of Supervisors, and if so, when?
Yes, I know we've reached out to all of the supervisors, let them know background on the company. I think everyone has my contact details.
Are you talking about the letter that you sent at 7:46 last night?
No, I'm talking to the letter we sent when we introduced the pilot in late March.
That one must have eluded me. All right.
Okay, thank you. And I know Supervisor Kim has a question for Spin, so I think we had a representative, Mr. No.
While Mr.
And by
Hansen
the
is,
way-
I have just one other question. I apologize for Mr. Hansen before he goes away, which is, can you tell us what the criminal charges were against Bird in Santa Monica?
There was a misunderstanding over the type of business that Bird was in Santa Monica when we applied for the business license permit there. That's all been resolved now. We're in a very good relationship with the city of Santa Monica.
And you settled in what dollar amount?
$300,000.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. And we'd like to call up the Spin representative.
Yeah, but before you go, Mr. Hansen.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hansen.
No, I'd like to talk to both Bird and Spin. So and this question I'll ask of Spin as well, although I had a specific question for Spin, and my apologies for confusing the two initially. Well, and this question is actually really limited. So I've seen a number of your motorized scoop boards in the district that I represent, and I've seen several that are tipped over. And so I'm already very concerned about just having them parked anywhere and kind of rules and regulations around that. But I'm very concerned when they're tipped over because, they're easy to miss and they're long on two ends and very easy to trip over. What will you do to ensure that that no longer happens?
Is this for me?
This is for both of you.
Yeah. We have a phone number on every bird and an email address on every bird. You can reach out. We generally can get someone out there within 2 hours to correct any situation. We want our riders to, when they see something like that, be part of a culture that you see a bird that's fallen over, you pick it up, and we see lots of people doing that in the cities where we're present now. We understand that concern. We want to make sure it's safe. We have the access number there so you can get a rep out to move it quick. They're very easy to move if anyone sees it. I think...
Well, I guess my question is, what can you do to even prevent that from happening in the first place? Because 2 hours is a very long time, and there's a lot of people to trip over your vehicles. And it's not just you. I mean, this is for all the companies. And at some point, if this continues to occur, you're going to get sued because someone is going to fall over. And so I assume it is in your personal, not your personal, but in your company's personal and financial interest to make sure that they don't get pushed over. Is there anything you can do with the weight of the scooters? I think this is a really big issue, and the fact that within the first week I had seen several that had been pushed over, I'm just very concerned about the long-term viability. I haven't seen a single one of for example, the jump bikes pushed over yet. And not to say that it hasn't happened, but they're a bit heavier. They are attached to a bike lock or a bike storage. So what can we do about this to even prevent it from happening so we don't have to call you and wait 2 hours for it to get picked up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly happy to talk with our team about if there are any design features that we could include that could address that issue. We're happy to look into that. I mean, at the same time, though, like bikes fall over, and any kind of transportation technology is going to have its issues. And I guess the piece that we want to stress is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. City of San Francisco gives out over 1 million vehicle citations for car parking every year. A bulk of those, I think over 20,000, are in the blocking driveways and crosswalks. And if we're going to allow alternative transit to compete with the car that has had ubiquitous access to the city for close to over 100 years now, we need to be thoughtful. Our companies need to be responsible in addressing the issues.
Are you suggesting then,
Yeah.
if you brought up the example that we cite when people are breaking law, are you suggesting that we cite and ticket you every time we see a scooter that's fallen over as part of our regulatory framework?
I absolutely support you in having regulations that address the safety issues here, 100%, yeah.
Why don't you require your users to push them up against a building or a wall?
So we require now that our users take a photo at the end of every ride, and if in your regulations you want to set specific standards about where things park, that's something that we could use that photo to verify.
Okay, great. Also, and this question will pertain to both of you, several members of the public talked about local hire and how they're getting hired. Could you talk a little bit more about that and what your numbers are?
Yeah, and I can address your question around scooters going over
sure.
as well. So hi, I'm Ben Baer, VP of Business Development and Policy at Spin.
Can you speak directly into the microphone?
Oh yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So yeah, in terms of the scooters being tipped over or falling over, Bird mentioned that they require a photograph at the end of every ride. This was a big learning from operating more than 50 dockless bike share markets across the country. We have a user rating feature where users rate thumbs up or thumbs down on whether the scooter was properly parked. We also encourage the public to reach out via our public helplines, and we'll go out and, similar to Bird, and pick them up quickly. We look forward to working with MTA on the numerous potential hardware and software approaches to solving this problem, and we expect it to be an iterative process that gets better over time and one we're supportive of.
So since you're up here,
Yeah.
And I know that our staff talked about this with you, but I just, it was really troubling that your company sent emails to my colleagues saying that you only put out the scooters in the South of Market after you asked SFMTA, MPC, and Supervisor Kim for permission. And that implied that we gave you permission to do so, and that was not the case.
Yeah, and my colleague Brian, I think, we met with Noel earlier, I think last week or earlier this week. We used the wrong word there. We did reach out, and I think Noel would acknowledge this.
You definitely reached out.
Beforehand to the relevant supervisors, to your office, and then we had several meetings with MTA. We also acknowledged that the political climate has changed, and this is a fast-moving thing. And we apologized for using the wrong word in that email, and want to continue to share data and figure out how to make this safe and also how to capture the transportation benefit of these things, which I think will prove to be profound over time.
I don't think it was as simple as using the wrong word. You actually said, and we only did so after we asked SFMTA, MTC, and Supervisors Kim's office for permission. I don't know what wrong word you used. That entire sentence was completely inaccurate. It is true that you met with us, and by the way, Bird met with our office too, so I do want to acknowledge Supervisor Peskin that the companies did outreach to us, and that was the right thing to do. But to say that you asked us for permission and imply that we gave that permission before you deployed the small fleet of scooters isn't the best way to build trust.
Yep. And I acknowledge that, and I think, I would ask Noelle about her experience in the meeting yesterday, and, we intend to move forward and correct that mistake. In terms of...
I did talk with Noelle. She works for me.
Yeah, no, of course. And in terms of, what we did, I think what we learned in our initial outreach in the meetings was As Supervisor Peskin acknowledged when the bike share ordinance was introduced last year, that there was no specific law regulating or preventing us from operating. And so that is a big difference from permission, and we apologized on the record over email for misspeaking in that case.
Okay, so my next question was on the local hire piece, which, several members of the public alluded to, and I'd like to understand how that works in more detail.
Yeah, so Spin is a San Francisco-based company, and the way that it works, it varies across all the companies, but generally similar to how an Uber driver would get a job where they go and they can pick up a rider. A charger, and the different companies use different words for this, can receive a bounty of anywhere between $5 and $15 or even $20 in some cases to go and pick up a scooter and charge it overnight. So a lot of folks who are in the so-called gig economy find it appealing because it can fit in around their other work. Also, folks with full-time jobs can use it to supplement their income. Our company's strategy in particular has been to partner with fleet operators who have folks who have vehicles and can do this charging work as supplemental income.
That doesn't sound like a targeted program, though. That just sounds like, by chance, people that live in San Francisco are doing this as part of a side gig. But, some members of the public somewhat alluded to the fact that there was some type of targeted local hire program, that you were going out of your way to hire people locally here in San Francisco. And honestly, working a couple of hours a week, to me, that's not a real employment program. So I'd like to understand what the local hire program that you are conceiving of would look like.
Yeah, we're still doing outreach to the community on that front, and we don't have a specific program to announce like Lime Bike may have earlier. But we have hired exclusively local folks so far, and we're forming that program now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. And if I could...
Mr. Hansen didn't respond to the local hire question.
And Supervisor Peskin, can you hold on?
Yeah, absolutely. I just had one for Spin.
This will be my last question. And it's just to Mr. Hansen to respond to the local hire. And I don't want to just hear that people are signing up locally to work for you. I want to understand what the targeted program is.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're looking into is working with social service agencies to do job training for some of the mechanic work we have, and that would include training on our end, getting people ready, and the tools in hand so that they can do light maintenance in the field. And would love to talk with you and any organizations that you recommend that we reach out to on that. That would be a big value to us and something that we want to be part of.
Okay, great. So maybe I just was blending the public comment together. So it's specifically Lime Bike that has a program with local organizations. Is that correct? Is there anyone from Lime Bike here? Okay.
I think all of us are interested in partnering.
No, I'm glad that there's interest, but I want to hear about specifics if there was an existing program, because members of the public implied that there was one in existence, and I understand now that they were speaking in regards to Lime Bike. And so if anyone from Lime Bike is here, it would be great to hear from you after Supervisor Peskin asks his questions.
Actually, my question was for Lime Bike. It wasn't even a question. I was just going to note that at least Bird puts on the floor of the scooter the fact that you need to have a helmet and that 2 riders should not be on it. I noticed that Lime Bikes do not have even that basic piece of information, but they can watch that on the rerun.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And I actually wanted to see if I could bring up SFMTA, Mr. Parks. I just had a few questions for the department. So, Mr. Parks, I'm just wondering, when was it that MTA first kind of heard from these companies, whether it was the 3 that we heard from today or others, about them wanting to come to San Francisco and launch their companies?
Sure, and I'm not going to have exact dates, but I can get that for you after this meeting if you want. We've heard from a number of the companies. I think the first that we heard from any company was probably Spin, and it was mid or late February, somewhere in that range. They notified us of interest in launching a pilot program. And that preceded by a couple of weeks the introduction by Supervisor Peskin of the Division I legislation to create a permit program. We also met with representatives from Lime in early March as well, and told them that we were creating a permit program. And they expressed interest in operating in San Francisco. Since then, we've also talked to representatives from Waybots and Zagster, I believe, and maybe a couple companies that I can't remember that are also potentially interested.
And when did Bird approach MTA?
I don't believe that we were, at least that I recall, I don't believe that we were approached by Bird until after they launched their pilot.
Okay.
And we sent a letter to them asking for more information on what they were doing.
Okay, thank you. And as you mentioned, so MTA started working on the legislation in February or March?
We began initial conversations in February, but we really didn't start working with the city attorney's office and the supervisor's offices until March.
Okay. And then Supervisor Peskin, you introduced, I think it was end of February, early March.
I thought it was March 7th, but
March 7th,
I'm actually looking at the newspaper, and it is March the 6th.
March 6th, okay. Okay, and the reason why, and thank you, Mr. Parks, the reason why I ask these questions is because, in light of the discussion here, and you may sit down, thank you, is that I think all of these new innovations and helping people get around in different modes is a wonderful thing. I myself rode a Vespa, around before Scoot came along. It was a great way to get around. I think that these other powered scooters are great in terms of, you can get around very quickly, very easily, especially if you're wearing a skirt or a dress. It's actually quite easy. So I'm not against these companies innovating and creating ways to ease our transportation methods, but I really do believe in a regulatory framework, making sure that our sidewalks are safe for people. And again, the reason why I asked SFMTA when they heard about this and when they got to work on the legislation, I think is really important, is that right after they heard from these companies that they were wanting to launch in San Francisco, they got to work pretty quickly on working on legislation, and it's probably the quickest I've seen. I mean, sometimes working with SFMTA could take a little bit long, but this is actually pretty quick. So I think that if MTA had said, well, they waited 6 months or a year to even start working on this, then I would have an issue with the department, but they didn't. They actually responded pretty quickly. So in San Francisco, we regulate our sidewalks in terms of, our sidewalk tables and chairs are dining for restaurants. They have to apply for permits from Public Works to even put tables and chairs outside to make sure that there's still enough clearance for wheelchairs, for strollers, et cetera, for pedestrian access. Grocery stores, they're not supposed to have, shelves of groceries taking up more than 6 feet of our sidewalks, again, for accessibility issues. So all these are just regulations we have in place to make sure that people have a path of travel, it's safe, especially if people are visually impaired or need a wheelchair or so forth. Those are all important aspects that we cannot just sort of write off and say that, we're actually against progressive new modes of transportation. It is absolutely not the case. We are very supportive, I would say collectively, of, again, different modes of transportation, but it cannot impede on pedestrian safety. So that is why I do support Supervisor Peskin's legislation today. I think we are not trying to ban any of these companies or these modes of transportation. We are just simply saying that until the regulatory framework is in place, until SFMTA issues permits, that you cannot leave these items unattended on our sidewalks. I don't think that's asking for too much. I think that in the spirit of competition between all these companies, one company launched, on St. Patrick's Day. Everyone else felt like they all had to launch immediately right after. And I think that, you're all literally knocking yourselves over just to compete with each other to be here in San Francisco. We would like you to be here, but we'd like you to follow our rules, is my point today. So in any case, I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Safai.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can Jamie from SFMTA come back up, please? So, thank you. My question is, do you have to wait till the legislation to be enacted to start drafting up the permit itself and what the permit process would be, or have you begun that process?
Oh, we don't have to wait. And so right now, if things go as planned, I think this Division 1 legislation would get its second reading on somewhere around April 24th, and there's a 30-day waiting period before it goes into effect. Our hope is that we would have the permit application and all the materials ready in advance of that date. So as soon as the Division 1 legislation exists to create a violation without a permit, that there is a permit that you would be able to apply for, and we'd be able to review that application.
So after the 24th, your plan is to have something up online that people can begin to start the application process?
Yeah, we don't have an exact date for having that up yet, but we would hope in mid-May we would have that application.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and May 1st, you know.
So about a month from now, you're saying you'll probably have the application process. I mean, I think we all unanimously agree that we have to have a permitting process. I don't know what world any business lives in that believes that they can just come into a city and operate without rules. And I understand that there was pressure on some of the businesses to move quickly because one other business did it, but then you stated that there's other people in this industry that have decided to wait. And the example that I like to use is Chariot. I mean, I know Chariot worked really long and hard on the permitting process with your agency, and they now, this past week, were able to finalize a process. I think the best, one of the things to take out of here today for some of the businesses is that when you work in collaboration with the city, you have a much better result. And we collectively have received hundreds and hundreds of complaints about these being strewn all over the city from all different types of advocacy groups, whether it's seniors, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's children advocates, whoever it is, but the public domain is the public domain, and that is in our interest to protect that. And so I really urge these businesses that have come here today to work aggressively with the city and follow the rules, follow the process, put in the applications, and within a month's time, you will be able to, at least there'll be rules of the games that will be laid out. It's not guaranteed you'll be able to operate in San Francisco, but at least there'll be rules of the game. So I appreciate the SFMTA's work on moving quickly on this, and I appreciate my colleague moving quickly to have this legislation ready. And as you said, it was introduced over a month ago. And so this was something that was pending that everyone knew was out there. So to then come in and flaunt the law even further erodes public trust in these businesses.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Parks, if you don't mind staying up. And first of all, I want to agree with some of the members of the public about how our city is too car-oriented, and that is what we incentivize in our current city infrastructure and how we do planning. And I know that SFMTA is working to move away from that. And so we should move quickly on a permitting process. I actually, I have a lot of issues with how the rollout happened, and I have a lot of issues with where the scooters are left and that they're very easy to tip over. And I think that we should have docks for them, similar to Bay Area Bike Share and other things. I want to use them too. I think that they would be a great way to get around the city as long as we have rules around the speed and make sure that they're done safely and they're docked safely. But I do also feel the frustration of companies that feel like we're not moving fast enough. And I'm actually, I'm very annoyed at how these companies move forward over the last couple of weeks. But there are companies like Scoot, Supervisor Safai brought up Chariot, but Scoot that did work with SFMTA on the rollout of their products and continue to work with you and are patiently waiting to roll out their electric bikes, for example. And so I know we have permitted jump, which is great, but we really, I think it's also a frustrating process as we figure out how to get people out of their cars as our city grows, and we're not figuring out a way to permit these products, but in a safe fashion. And so I know you're saying that you'll be ready in a month, but I'm just curious as to what will go into that process.
Sure, and I just want to emphasize that our goal in this is absolutely not to ban scooters. It's to create a program by which they're regulated in a way that serves the public interest. And so we have an interest in seeing how these work and how they can serve as a mobility option as well. And I would also say that one of the reasons that we're very interested in the data sharing is to understand exactly how these scooters do play a role in expanding mobility options to the extent that they are substituting for Uber and Lyft trips. That's something that can serve a lot of benefits. If they're only substituting for people that would have been walking otherwise, that has less in the way of public policy benefits. So the data sharing isn't just a requirement that we're putting out there. It's something that we're very interested in understanding. In terms of our work to get this ready, our goal is absolutely to have the permit program in place by mid-May. The details of the legislation will be made public in advance of the May 1st MTA board meeting. I would say that we are looking, all the numbers are being worked out, but probably more than one permit that would be issued, but some sort of cap on the total number of permits and the total number of scooters, and a thorough evaluation program to understand how they work.
I think it's important to cap the number that are on the road so that we can see how it works out before we expand the program. Have you thought about, May 1st is very soon, so I assume then you've started to think about speed where we would allow the motorized scooters and how to dock them. Could you share some of SFMTA's thinking around that?
Sure. In terms of where they're allowed on the road, we have more limited authority because that's generally covered under the California Vehicle Code, either under current law or under the pending legislation. And so they're not allowed on sidewalks. They are allowed in bike lanes. They're not allowed on roads with greater than 25 miles an hour, but that's not really subject to MTA. Mm-hmm. We will be working very hard on really detailed placement guidelines for where you can and cannot park the scooters, and requiring operations plans that show that the scooter companies can meet those requirements, and if not, the permit could be terminated.
Can we create docking areas for these scooters?
That could be something we could consider as part of the pilot program.
I just think they are so easy to tip over, and that is the part that really gets to me, is that they're just strewn all over the streets. And already in the first week, I saw, a number of them tipped over. And I know someone said that bicycles get tipped over too, but I really have not seen it in that number.
Yeah, so that's certainly something we can look at more and explore through a pilot program. I don't know if that would be required in the legislation, but it would certainly be an option.
Well, what can we do to make sure that they're not tipped over then? What are ways to, counter that? Because it's just too easy.
Ultimately, I think there are maybe a few ways where it could happen, but we would put the onus on the companies to come to us with a solution and be open to those solutions as they bring them up, whether it's a docking area or a special way that the scooters lock or waiting. We're not the experts on that, but they need to come up with a way where their operations don't impact public safety.
I just don't know how we were going to be able to permit them within a month, because we just asked them for some ideas and they didn't have any besides coming within 2 hours to pick them up, and that's just not good enough.
Yeah. Well, I think we can certainly work with your office on the details of what the docking would look like in the Division 2 legislation.
I really hope you're not looking to our office for a solution on how to dock them.
No, we're looking to the companies for the solutions.
Okay, because I don't have the solution for you. I'm just saying I don't think we can permit this until we figure out how to dock them, and I don't know why they have to be permitted to be docked anywhere.
So the suggestion would be not to have them docked on sidewalks, or not to be left on sidewalks, but only in designated docking areas.
I just don't see a way around these scooters from getting tipped over. They're fairly light, and what I like about the jump bikes is that you do have to put them up against a bike, a bike storage lock.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the jump bikes, we were very happy that they had the locking mechanism. And I think in the case of scooters, we would not issue a permit to any company until we were satisfied with their operations plan and how they were going to prevent scooters tipping over. So we're not obligated to issue any permits. We would review that and ensure that it meets our requirements before we issued a permit.
Going back to electric bicycles, what is the SFMTA's plan to roll out more companies to do that?
Right now, JUMP is operating under an 18-month permit program. The permit program started in January, and so next June or whenever that 18-month pilot ends, that's where we would have in place whatever the next phase of that looks like.
So we're not going to permit any more electric bikes until June of 2019?
For stationless bikes operating in the public right-of-way, that's currently the approach under the pilot program.
I think I want to push back a little bit. By the way, I don't want you to permit, countless electric bike programs, but I think, as we talk about giving people options outside of their vehicles. I would like to have a conversation with SFMTA about that. And then if that's the case with e-bikes, why are the motorized scooters any different? Because it seems like you said that you would permit multiple immediately.
I think we're looking to build on what we did in the stationless bike share program and learn from those lessons. And also in the case of bike share, we do have or in the case of Ford Go Bike, we have another bike share system operating, so it wasn't the case of only having a single operator. But we're certainly happy to talk more about the bike share program with your office and how we evaluate the stationless bike share program and expand it in the future.
I mean, to be honest, more than the motorized scooters, I'm really interested in expanding our electronic bike programming. I just think that that's a great way for folks to get around. And, we have a lot of hills in San Francisco. I don't think motorized scooters are really helpful with hills, but certainly electric bikes are. And it's great to see people riding them on their road. I just think it's just going to be an immediate solution for so many folks to not ride in cars or in rideshare and onto bikes. So I would like to have further conversation about that. I'm not sure why we're thinking of permitting so many e-scooters so quickly and yet holding back on electronic bikes. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, we're happy to talk more with your office about the e-bikes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. I actually had the same question around the pilot program, and so we can do a follow-up offline, but I agree. I think we should allow, even in the pilot program, different kinds of companies to be able to take hold, not just one company. Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the members of the public and the committee members for listening to this. What I think would have been just a totally non-controversial piece of legislation had it not been for the overreaction of one or more of these companies who, as per usual or too often, want to ask for forgiveness than permission. They all, and Mr. Hansen admitted it, entered the field knowing that this piece of legislation was pending, then went and pretended like it was a ban when it was not. To the gentleman from Spin, instead of saying whatever non-answer you gave Supervisor Kim, I would apologize and say that was a material misrepresentation. You did not give us permission. We misrepresented that, for which we apologize. I say the same thing to Mr. Hansen from Bird, although he kind of apologized, which is you don't go about and make misrepresentations to the Board of Supervisors and the people of the City and County of San Francisco. It does not engender trust. The way this was designed to work was to put forth a mechanism to allow professionals at the MTA in collaboration with the regulated community to come up with a common sense permitting scheme. But when you enter the arena with that level of hubris and arrogance, you don't create trust. And I really want to send a message not only to e-scooters. I mean, last year it was Blue Go-Go, and the list will go on as the shared mobility world continues to evolve, that it would be very nice if the tech bros could come in and ask in a collaborative fashion for permission rather than after the fact forgiveness. And with that, colleagues, I would hope that one of you would move the amendments and send this to the full board as a committee report as amended.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Wholeheartedly agree with all of your comments. Again, I want to reiterate, we are not here to ban these companies, these services. We are here to ensure the public safety of all of our residents here and the people who visit. So with that, we have a motion to amend, as Supervisor Peskin stated. Okay, we'll do that without objection. And as amended, if we could send forward to the full board with positive recommendation as a committee report.
Second.
Okay, we'll do that without objection.
And Madam Chair, before you adjourn, I have gotten clarification on item number 2 that indeed it was supposed to be 25% and not 25 degrees, and I've discussed that in a sidebar conversation here with Supervisor Safai. So if one of you would like to rescind the vote on the continuance and reconsider sending it to the full board, it was indeed supposed to be 25% as reflected in the blue maps and the previous legislation.
Okay, Supervisor Safai, making a motion to rescind the vote on item 2.
Make a motion to rescind item number 2.
Okay, so we'll do that without objection. All right, and now do we have a motion on item 2?
Motion to send item number 2 to the full board with positive recommendation.
All right, and we will do that without objection. All right, Madam Clerk, are there any other items before us today?
There's no further business.
Thank you. We are adjourned.